Привет, my friends. Nice little thug. You give him a writ of hocus pocus. Not just another episode of the top 10 favorite and from what I believe are the best performances by some of the greatest actors in all of cinema. There's only one thing that gets orders and gives orders, and this is it. I'll be starting from 10 and then spetting my way up to number 1. And listen here, cutie pies, I have seen every film attainable of these artists. You get that? Attainable. So every list comes from truthful and passionate accuracy. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this was the winner of the Patreon request. Nicholas Graves, I love you, buddy, which you can vote on my page with the same name, the link is down below, where you can gain access to voting power and more bonus content. The more the merrier, my friends. So now it gives me great pleasure to talk about, at one point known as one of the greatest actors of the 20th century, the chameleon himself, Paul Muni. Born from a Jewish family as Friedrich Meshalem Meyer Wiesenfront, technically in Lemberg, Galicia, which was the Austro-Hungarian Empire at that time. Now it is rightfully known as Lviv, Ukraine, and let it stay that way, damn it. Anyway, his family moved to Chicago when he was only 7 years old, Yiddish being his first language. Having both of his parents as actors, he immediately became fascinated with acting, creating his own makeup and playing 80-year-old characters when he was only 12 years old. He was spotted by Maurice Schwartz, the head of the Yiddish Art Theater in New York, to perform there, and he immediately became a great sensation on Broadway by the time he was 31. And what do I always say, folks? If you're big on Broadway, Hollywood definitely always wants you to come out and play. And though it was hard for Muni to get a strong career in Hollywood films, he still made such an impact for more actors to come, inspiring such greats like Marlon Brando. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, Paul Muni is certainly one of the greatest leading actors of stage and screen the world has ever seen. He elevated the game when it came to stage actors transferring to film acting and brought a whole new level of dedication and commitment to the craft that everyone would qualify as method acting today. The man would do every bit of diligent research, reading everything there was on the role, traveling to their birthplace, talking to the people who knew of the roles in question, if possible. And what stood him apart was his majestical voice and body movement that kept us captivated all the way through. He has certainly been accused, even by his own contemporaries at the time, of going over the top quite often because they felt he could never really subdue his theatricality for camera. And I can agree with that statement, certainly, but one, you will see his many subdued and moving performances as we get into this, and two, that was part of his amazing charm and star power. Even though he never liked to be referred to as a movie star, he always wanted to be known as an actor. How he was able to shoot the moon with his choices is something that even myself as an actor, I always strive for. Once again, always remember, I only cover film, so any TV appearances are out the door, but we mustn't forget Muni's honorable and Emmy-nominated performance in the classic series Playhouse 90, specifically in the episode entitled Last Clear Chance, where he plays a lawyer trying to defend his own son, or else he will be disbarred. Directed by George Roy Hill, the Oscar-winning director of The Sting and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Muni is still so strong at the humble age of 63, even though he had to wear a small radio transmitter in order to be fed his lines because he had the worst trouble memorizing them. It was very stressful, but they made it work, and Muni turned in a performance that, if you couldn't see him on Broadway, you got the next best thing through your television sets, which was what Playhouse 90 was basically all about. The man had more stage credits than film, that's for sure. Between the production of Key Largo, Yesterday's Magic, A Flag is Born, but famously, he would take over for Lee J. Cobb in the great multiple award winner Death of a Salesman, and played Willie in the first British production in London. And more importantly, he would originate the role of Henry Drummond on Broadway in the gravitationally epic Inherit the Wind, winning the Tony for Best Actor. The man was so inspirational in how he could disappear into a role that he was often known as the new Lon Chaney, who could master any age, any character trait, when they put their mind and time into it. So look out, Tony, I'm gonna spit about the top 10 best performances of one of the greatest actors of the 20th century, Paul Muni. Starting off at number 10, we have a powerful piece which features unofficially Muni's third Academy Award nominated performance for Best Actor in Black Fury. I say unofficially since this was technically a write-in nomination and did not officially go through, but after viewing it a few times, I can say it is a powerful performance of a deeply monumental story, based on the short story Jan Volkanik and the play Bolhank. And a true story, we have Paul Muni as Joe, a Slavic coal miner who is pushed to being the spokesperson for the fellow miners on better contracts and wages. But things take a turn as one of their own is murdered by the corrupt mining cops. So Joe protests even further by igniting dynamite in the mines toward their property. And then he will do anything he can to take down the cops who murdered his friend and co-worker. Directed by the Oscar-winning majesty himself, Michael Curtiz, this is indeed a very powerful and political film, with Muni going, yes, quite over the top, a lot in a couple of the scenes. I mean, the whole sequence of him at the bar and then heading home should have been filmed on just a stage. But at the same time, you believe his vibrant energy. You believe the character as a larger-than-life miner who works hard for the American dream. And talking about committing everything he had to a role, Muni definitely didn't shy away from traveling and working his way around the industry in Pennsylvania in order to really capture the essence of his character. Number 9, Angel on My Shoulder. The fun little rendition of the great classics Here Comes Mr. Jordan, and then later revamped as Heaven Can Wait, and then again redone as Down to Earth with Chris Rock. But this 1941 revamp was remade into the TV series My Partner the Ghost, which is alright. You guys remember that show? This film definitely carries some fun with all the thanks in the world to its cast, Anne Baxter, Claude Rains, and the man of the hour, Paul Muni. In this case, he plays gangster Eddie, who gets out of prison and is gunned down by his partner. So off to hell Eddie goes and meets Nick, Claude Rains, and agrees to help Nick with his problem, which in turn helps Eddie get his revenge on his partner Smiley by taking over the body of a judge to ruin that judge's reputation. As every action he does in effect reverses the goal of damaging the judge's reputation, Eddie falls in love with the judge's fiancée, Anne Baxter. Muni promised himself he wouldn't make another gangster picture or play one again like he did 14 years previously, but Muni at this point needed a good lead role as his star power was starting to dwindle. So good decision with this one, and being Archie Mayo's last film. Muni does have a great balance of menace and comedic charm, which is always appreciated. You always have to give mad respect to an actor who was suffering through the flu as well during production and clashing heavily with its director. But in the end, it all works out swimmingly. Number 8, The Valiant. One of the most rare of Paul Muni's films, which I was privileged to catch on TCM for the first time a long time ago. And if you're a Paul Muni fanatic, you know it's a very important film in Muni's filmography. For it is not only Paul Muni's film debut, but it features technically his first Academy Award nominated performance for Best Actor, even though, again, reports state it wasn't an official nomination, just a write-in nod. But after seeing this again a few times myself, it is indeed a very effective performance worthy of that nod. Based on the one-act play, Muni plays an anonymous man who confesses to a murder he committed just a matter of time earlier, because he just simply had to go for what he did. Suspense. But he gives the cops a false name, James Dyke, and he's immediately convicted for the crime, sentenced to death. But as the press releases his picture and news, Dyke may have his family recognize him, and they may try to reunite with their long-lost family member, who would be not only a dear son and brother, but an honorable war hero. This film completely caught me by surprise when I first saw it, and though it moves very slowly, it's still very impactful. Released in the year 1929, the studio was still progressing with the talkie, so it very much has that silent to talkie charm about it, and Muni's performance is just captivating. Just by the opening shot where we reveal Muni after he finished the murder, and then slowly walking the streets of New York, helping a little boy after he scrapes his knee. It builds so much fascination about this character. And this was the first time I really experienced Muni so subdued. For being his debut, you would think he would explode in theatricality, but he rather zombifies James Dyke. As you can imagine, a man who not only has committed murder, but has come back from war. Also not officially nominated for Best Screenplay, you can find the Valiant on YouTube, actually. So I recommend Muni's performance for sure for y'all. Number 7, The Good Earth. Absolutely one of the great grand films of the 1930s, with Paul Muni starring alongside two-time Academy Award winner and famously winning consecutively Louise Reiner as Wang and Olan, two Chinese farmers who build a family and strive to prosper in northern China pre-World War I. But the decline of the great house and the rise of the famine and harsh times begin to test their abilities and will. Based on the novel by Nobel Prize winner Pearl S. Buck, we have Paul Muni in one of his most beautiful and subtle performances. Same for Louise. My goodness. Their chemistry together is so moving. You can't take your eyes off them. But okay, let's address the elephant in the room. Majority of the cast are played by white actors made up in yellowface. And yes, always remember, that was the norm of those times. Producer Irving Thalberg planned to cast Chinese-American actors for the roles like Anna May Wong, but the Hays Code still prevented that. So Paul Muni and Louise Reiner fell into those roles. And when you see the final product, not many people really have too much of an issue. Reportedly, Paul Muni did not enjoy making this film too much, since he was apprehensive on taking the role. He told Irving after he was offered the role, "I'm about as Chinese as Herbert Hoover." And he sometimes went AWOL on set, and his stand-in had to step in for him on the long shots. Last but not least, Louise herself mentioned at the TCM Film Festival in 2010, before showing the film, that she found working with Mr. Muni a little difficult, since Muni would have his wife sit by the camera to make sure it was at an attractive angle on Muni's coverage. We all know actors like that, don't we? But all in all, you can't deny the honesty that Paul gives the role, resulting in 5 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture, and winning 2 for Reiner and its cinematography. The Good Earth still holds up in spirit, with quite some help from Muni. Number 6, The World Changes. Very much a surprising pre-code picture starring Muni as Oren, a young, ambitious farmer who goes into the meatpacking business and grows to power and success, inventing the refrigeration freight boxes on wheels. But with his success in business, his marriage and family decline horribly. It's the classic success story where the entrepreneur knew how to achieve success financially, but personally and spiritually, he did not know how to help his family emotionally. I honest to God love Paul's performance in this film, for it shows every aspect of his strength as an actor with such simplicity that you yearn for his own success. But at the same time, you want to slap the sense in him to care for his family and make changes. The film was apparently loosely based on the life of Gustavus Franklin Swift Sr., founder of the meatpacking empire, which makes sense, and director Mervyn LeRoy certainly does an effective job of guiding the rise to power and decline in spirituality, for the title of the film sums it up just right. The habits of successful entrepreneurs usually remain the same, but the world changes all around them. And are entrepreneurs going to adapt to those times where families should be the focus? Or it can raise the question, should they? And we see every step of that, every inch of that on Muni's face, which is intensely entertaining. Number 5, The Last Angry Man. A fantastic and moving portrayal by Muni in his 6th Academy Award nominated performance for Best Actor. Based on the novel by Gerald Green, he plays Dr. Sam Abelman, a crusty old doctor in the harsh, violent, and broken down neighborhood who continues to help the sick and the poor, even though he encounters every piece of a relational challenge within his toil. At the same time, he has a television executive nephew who sees his dedication and wants so badly to save his practice that he wants to profile him on national television. I wish I could rate this one much higher because Paul Muni's performance in this film, ladies and gentlemen, is so deeply moving that I was waiting for a performance just as strong and simple as he is here. The film certainly isn't perfect. There are a lot of baggy things about it. But hey, there's Billy D. Williams in his film debut. This film certainly is all about Paul Muni, as he still remains so present and loving in the narrative that it holds a strong and dear farewell from the actor, being his very last film, which came out in 1959. In all honesty, it is Muni's performance here that deserved that Oscar that year. You were great in Ben-Hur, Charlton, but Muni stole our very hearts. Number 4, Scarface. Yes, let the hate mail fly in, being rated here only at number 4. Needless to say, these top 5 were incredibly difficult, my friends, and bear in mind, I saw this adaptation sometime after first seeing the famous 1983 adaptation with Al Pacino. Say hello to my little friend! And I absolutely love that adaptation. But Al Pacino would not want to adapt it if he didn't love and admire the original Scarface with the commanding Paul Muni in the titular role as Tony Camonte, a young Italian immigrant who wants to take over the world, practically, during the Prohibition times of the 1920s. And surely, after taking out one boss he works for, he claws his way to the top of the trade. But will his success last long? Obviously, based on the dealings of Al Capone and the book by Armitage Trail, this pre-code gangster classic remains one of the best films director and producer Howard Hawks has ever done. And Muni's performance is just astoundingly fierce and vicious, that it ranks among the top of gangster roles in gangster cinema. Hawks and Ben Hecht, co-writer of the screenplay, saw Muni on Broadway, and it impacted greatly the decision to cast him. Having Edward G. Robinson's Little Caesar and Jimmy Cagney's Public Enemy making a huge impact already, audiences were still captivated by Muni's commanding screen presence. Of course, nowadays, many audiences alike still claim Muni to be over the top, and even co-screenwriter Academy Award winner Ben Hecht was critical of Muni's performance, saying he was too silent and moody to be Al Capone. It may have been historically inaccurate in regards to Capone's actions and behavior, but that's why they call it inspiration, friends. I love so many moments of Muni here, especially the iconic sequence where he looks out the window and sees, "The world is yours." And the famous line, "Get out of my way, Johnny, I'm gonna spit." It's so cool. It shot a whole kick of adrenaline in me as a kid watching this, and still packs a damn punch every time I watch Muni climb for what he wants. Even though I know he's a villain and an anti-hero. At first, Muni didn't even want to do it because he didn't feel suited for it. But his wife Bella convinced him otherwise, and to this day, the original Scarface remains one of my ultimate favorites in the genre, thanks to Muni's unflinching power. Number 3, I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang. You must know this was massively hard to place at number 3 because of how much I absolutely love this picture and how much I friggin' love Paul Muni's 2nd Academy Award nominated performance here for Best Actor. I can remember the very first time I saw this film when I was in junior high, and I was so utterly captivated by Muni's strength and force, based on the autobiographical book of the same name by Robert Elliott Burns, which is just amazing and was later remade for TV with Val Kilmer in the lead role. Here is the almighty Muni as James Allen, a decorated World War I vet, returning home to find his new fortune. Until a horrible holdup occurs in a diner where he's forced to be an accessory, and then is wrongly arrested and convicted to join a Georgia chain gang. He tries with every bit of might to string it out, but he can't take it any longer and plots to escape in the most brutal way possible. If you haven't seen it, I can't spoil it even more past that. Maybe one more bit later, but Jesus. It is so gripping and soul-shattering, with Muni's performance adding so much of the drama that you beg and plead for his justice. Director Mervyn LeRoy, again, saw Muni in a play, Counselor at Law specifically, and immediately wanted to cast him. And you want to talk about preparation. Oh my God. Muni again went all in for this role, finding every law book in the country about the penal system, to having multiple intense meetings with the man himself, Robert Burns, who was technically still on the lam at the point of filming. Burns had to use a different name in order to come to set to give consultation. Muni said he wanted to really capture the smell of fear, and not to imitate Burns, but to be Burns. And I believe he achieved that with flying colors. The moments when he is on the tracks and he's supposed to be hammering them. Instead, he and his inmate hammer his chains so his ankles can slip easily through. To the amazing moment when he's back in the chain gang after he escapes and gets caught again. Spoiler, he's waiting for the appeal and pardon his lawyer promised him. And when the warden tells him it's been denied, the way Muni crumbles slowly back down on his bed just kills you. I remember how my heart sank when I first experienced that. And we can never forget the grand final moment when he finds his love Helen and he's on the run, and they have one final goodbye as he has to keep running. And she cries out, "Do you need money? How will I find you?" He's slowly backing up and shaking his head. And as it fades to black, she asks one final question, "How do you live?" And in the blackout, he says, "I steal," and runs away. That powerful moment hit me like a ton of bricks, just as it does for countless many. And the myth goes that it was a lighting accident, and Muni's last line was supposed to be lit before the blackout, but lighting accidentally went out when he said it. Whether it was an accident or not, it's one of the greatest and powerful moments in film noir and cinema. Rightfully nominated also for Best Sound and Best Picture. The film remains one of the greatest, and I tell you, friends, if Charles Laughton didn't come out with The Private Life of Henry VIII that year, that Oscar should have been Muni's. Number 2, The Story of Louispasteur. Surprise, surprise? Perhaps, my friends, but we must never forget the monumental and inspiring performance by Paul Muni in his first and only Academy Award winning performance for Best Actor as the great doctor himself, Louispasteur. Also nominated for 3 other Oscars and winning 2 more of those for the screenplay and story, Muni, he steals the show as the great microbiologist who publicizes the theory on microbes causing diseases, especially when doctors perform medical procedures without washing their hands. The film indeed fictionalizes the lot of Pasteur's life sequences, but as a film it moves swiftly and greatly. It is so involving and enthralling that you want to know what happens next. Thanks to the brilliance that is Muni, who brings the doctor to life for us to navigate so easily and willingly that I always recommend for this film to be shown in schools. Muni wanted a change of pace when it came to film roles after Scarface, so he was looking for a good one. And Muni had it in his contract that he had script approval. So when the script for Louispasteur showed up, he insistently and immediately approved it, even though producer Hal B. Wallace wanted to change it so much. Warner Brothers didn't even believe in the picture, which is why they gave it such a small budget. They figured, okay, let Muni get the artistry out of his system and he'll do another real good moneymaker. And lo and behold, the care and passion that was poured into the picture shines like never before. This is Prime Muni, which started the whole trend of biopics Muni became known for. If only we got the Beethoven biopic Muni asked for. Can you imagine what kind of a film and performance we would have been blessed to have? Of course, Muni dove himself deep into breaking down his character, from traveling to Paris and visiting the Pasteur Institute to giving every action a purpose. No line or action goes wasted for Muni, which is one of the great splendors of his service to storytelling. Now see here, friends, here are some honorable mentions. Hudson's Bay, a nice little factually inaccurate picture about the expedition of French-Canadian explorer Pierre Esprit Radisson, played by Muni, who along with his associate go about an ambitious fur trading mission and envision a future empire with the help of King Charles II, played by the lovely Vincent Price. Paul Muni, to me, gives his best impression of Pepe Le Pew, to be quite honest. But you can't help but admire his commitment to the material, and again, with his theatrical training, he does what he can to bring this explorer's brave and confident love for adventure to life. Juarez, a well-intentioned, flawed, yet valiant film about the political war between Napoleon III and his newly appointed emperor ally, Maximilian, against Mexico's real president, Benito Juarez, played subtly by Muni. The whole cast does the best they can, including Bette Davis with her black hair and darkened face. Those were the times, but in my opinion, Brian Ahern's Academy Award-nominated performance for Best Supporting Actor as Maximilian is what really gives this film more honesty and heart. Side note, this was the film Betty was filming if you ever see the hilarious blooper of Betty saying the line, "Oh God, help me, help me, help me, I'm stuck on his button." However, Paul Muni gives a moving portrayal of the Mexican president, even though he added almost 80 pages of dialogue for himself to beef up his role, since he had a clause in his contract for the character he portrayed to be within the title. Don't believe me? Just ask co-writer John Huston and Davis. Hey, us artists, we all have our days in Hollywood. Commandos Strike at Dawn. One heck of a propaganda film of World War II, but features a grand yet very subtle and poignant performance from Muni as Eric, a Norwegian widower and fisherman who decides to lead his village into battle against the evil uprising of the Nazis. This film indeed incorporates many clips of actual battle footage, and it was one of a handful of World War II films that touched on the Norwegian resistance. From a dramatic standpoint, it really isn't that in-depth, as it focuses more on the action sequences, even though its Academy Award-nominated score is quite effective. But being part Norwegian myself, I hold this film in a very special place, especially since Muni is still so present. I especially love his line, "We have to become gangsters." It's pretty cool. Border Town, the entertaining yet slightly controversial story which was re-edited because of the Hays Code, has Paul Muni playing a Mexican lawyer, Johnny Ramirez, who travels from LA to a border town in Mexico and gets connected with a seedy casino owner. And Muni becomes the second in command of the casino and turns it into the Silver Sliver. Immediately, the casino owner's wife, Marie, played by Bette Davis, becomes mighty infatuated with Muni, even though Muni is in love with Margaret Lindsay. Quite often seen as the original film which inspired They Drive by Night with George Raft and Bogey, Muni again stretches himself in different cultures and gives his fair share of over-the-top expression, but nonetheless, he is captivating. A Song to Remember, one of the great fictionalized and romanticized biopics of a famous composer. In this case, Friedrich Chopin, played wonderfully by Oscar nominee Cornel Wilde. But top billing, of course, had to go to Paul Muni as Chopin's instructor and manager, as Chopin grew to great heights. but the distraction of a new love could break away the lifelong partnership between the pupil and loving professor. In a way, that feels more of the focus in this film. The relationship between the instructor and the pupil. Good versus evil, since this was produced during World War II. And of course, in Paul Muni's contract, he had to take first billing and focus, for his star power needed to shine more, apparently. Which in retrospect may hurt the film, but honestly, to me it doesn't hurt it from being a solid and entertaining picture at all. What it lacks in accuracy, it makes up in beauty, and Paul Muni is still so charming and lovable as Elsner, and he does develop great chemistry with Cornel Wilde as Chopin. Nominated for 6 Oscars, it still remains a beautiful and passionate film which showcases Muni giving what I believe he gives best in his films: grace. Number 1, The Life of Emile Zola. I couldn't deny it. Once again, this was devastatingly difficult, but quite honestly, folks, Muni's phenomenal, technically 5th Academy Award nominated performance as Emile Zola is one of the greatest performances ever given, not only in the 1930s, but ever. When we talk about Muni disappearing in a role, audiences, artists, and critics alike agree his performance here as being one of the shining examples. The film itself made incredible history at the time of 1938, being nominated for 10 Oscars, the first film to exceed double-digit nominations, and winning 3 of those for Best Screenplay, Best Supporting Actor for Joseph Schildkraut, and Best Picture. The biggest crime in my opinion, is not awarding Muni again for Best Actor. I love you, Spencer Tracy, when you played Manuel beautifully in Captain's Courageous, but Paul Muni completely steals the show as the man of the 2 hours. Of course, the man invested himself in the role, reading everything he could on the man, and willing to go through the 3.5-hour regimen of makeup for the older version of Zola, since the film was not filmed in chronological order. It's a bit conflicting, since the title is a bit misleading. Sure, we do cover Emile Zola's early life as a writer and activist, with such controversial and yet brilliant works like The Confessions of Claude and Nana, combating the political corruption of Paris. But majority of the film centers around the Dreyfus affair, where Captain Alfred Dreyfus is accused of giving military information to the Germans, so he is imprisoned in Devil's Island. Zola finally gives in and defends Dreyfus with his famous letter, J'accuse, accusing injustice. The real injustice was the fact that Dreyfus was Jewish, but Warner Brothers didn't want to use the word Jew in any of their films at that time, since the Nazis were on the rise and didn't want anything to do with them. So it's hard to really say it's really the life of Emile Zola, but nonetheless, it is a fantastic yet slightly fictionalized account of the man and one of the most important events in his history, as well as the history of Paris. You notice so many of the little idiosyncrasies and character traits that are just splendidly captivating, like the twirl of his cane and just how he sets up his posture. He's truly moving, especially when he comes to his apparent 6-minute monologue, which was rumored to have been done in one take, even though it was interspliced with some crowd reaction, so it was clearly more than one setup. But the man came from theater, so you know he must have done it in one take. And I bet you he probably didn't even call line either. All in all, to this day, the film is regarded as one of the best biopics ever made, and at the time it was made in 1938, it was the best biopic ever made. And without a doubt, it is one of the greatest performances ever given of a real-life figure you will ever find. That's pretty amazing to have only 23 films to your name and to make a sensational impact on audiences and actors alike. Many playwrights, like Arthur Miller, analyzed Muni as an actor who may have been pursued by fear in the arts. Fear of failing, fear of injustice to a role, which can be dangerous indeed because it generates obsession, which he totally had. But in order to be a successful actor, you need a good piece of obsession. Many of his colleagues were not fans of his since he seemed very self-centered in his own craft, having it in his own contract to receive top billing, top priority, which once again we all see, and at the same time, you look at the care, the concentration, the focus, the dedication he gave to every one of his roles, which made every single character so human, so unique, and so powerful. The man had many talents, including musicianship. Have you ever seen him on What's My Line with his violin? He was such an accomplished violinist. Gratefully, TCM and the Criterion Channel have honored Paul Muni with a marathon of his films. And I only implore great people like you, keep his spirit alive when it comes to the power of acting, the power and influence of cinema, and the love of storytelling. Zakinchino, my friends. Now tell me, do you agree with my picks? What are your favorite performances by this incredible chameleon that made acting even better? Paul Muni. Please share in the comments below. I always love to hear from you, my friends. If you like this, please click that like button, subscribe, ring that bell, tell all your friends who love classic films, and if you want to have first say and dibs on whom you want me to cover next, please subscribe on the Patreon page because that is where all decisions will be made, just for you guys. Until next time, folks, thank you so much again for watching. And remember to keep the support and love alive for the Ukraine, please. Because you know Paul Muni would, the actor of great integrity.